How do you explain where good ideas come from? That's a question that I've asked myself many times. For me, it came actually during a transformational moment when I was in Africa. Last February, I was there. We had just got done celebrating a dedication of a well. What I do is I help run an organization that puts water wells in for fresh water. They put in medical clinics. And we took a couple of teachers with us. And so we went into this village in a very remote part of Africa, in West Africa. And there were about 4,000 people that greeted us, and women were clapping, and they were excited, and they were all cheering. And it was a really exciting moment. And then we came out of that village and we went to have lunch. And as we were having lunch, one of the African leaders whom we've been working with for quite a long time looked at the two teachers, and he said to them this question, or this statement. He said, "Never underestimate the power of an idea." And that was a defining transformational moment for me, where I heard that and I thought, whoa, that's a pretty powerful statement. And I started to think about that concept of the power of an idea. And as I thought about that, I thought about, where do ideas come from? How are they germinated? And I know that we have a lot of things that we talk about. In fact, Gallup talks about one of our strengths being ideation. And so there are people that have all sorts of ideas that germinate and that start to happen in their thinking. And then there are people who have maybe just a few ideas. For me personally, I thought about how this idea of putting in a well in remote Africa actually started, and how it grew. And so that's really what I want to share with you this afternoon, is the idea of how ideas start, how they're germinated, how they become reality. One of the things that I learned is, as you think about how an idea gets started, is that there are systems in our own environment that illustrate that. They talk about ecotones. They're called ecotones, and there were two diverse species meet, and there's this middle space. And I'm not an expert at this, but they talk about how during this time where it's vegetation and forest land come together, and there's this middle space and two species come together, and that's where there's kind of this enriched area, this ecological environment that's kind of unique. And I thought about it in terms of how ideas start to germinate, and as they germinate, there are two communities that come together, and then as those two communities come together, these ideas start to grow and develop almost organically. And when I thought about that, I thought about back to this concept of the wells, and how, many months before we went and made the dedication, it started with this idea. And then from that idea, we started to talk to communities. So we brought the idea back and we talked to some university students, and they got excited about it. And then we talked to some school teachers, and these school teachers started to get engaged, and they started to talk to their students about getting involved with this and how this could be a great community service project and a global learning project. And then from there, the students got involved from the university and said, hey, we can do an assembly, and we can talk about sustainable energy, and we can talk about conserving water. And so these assemblies started happening, and these kids started to get engaged, and they started raising money for this well, and they started to learn where this part of Africa was. And then from there, we had the medical community started to get involved, and all of a sudden you have all these communities kind of meeting in this middle space. And from that, the idea just kind of was birthed, and it just grew organically. From that point on, I started to think, well, then what was the other thing that started to take place as that idea was germinated, as communities came together and started to say, what if? And as it started to grow, then I started to think about how the other thing that has to happen is this relentless kind of intrinsic drive to see that idea come into reality. So it grows organically, the good idea, but then also, communities get involved. But then there's this sense where these communities come together and they have this compelling intrinsic drive to make that reality, or make that idea reality. I thought about a time when I was in China with this businessman who had started his own business. And those who've started your own business or started either profit, nonprofit, or been involved in a project, you know that there's a certain drive that has to happen to make an idea become reality. And so we were talking about this concept of this compelling intrinsic drive that you have to make something become reality. And as we were talking there, we were sitting across the table, and he took out a medallion. He had started his own company, threw it across the table at me, and I looked at it, and it was a metal medallion. It had the stamp of his business on there. And then I looked at it and flipped it over. On the back, it said, "Never give up." And I laughed, and I looked at him, and I said, "Why'd you put that on there?" He says, "Well, you know why." And I thought, that's the truth about starting anything, taking an idea and making it reality. That there gets a point where you just have to remind yourself, I can't give up if I'm going to see this idea become a reality. And so there is, I think, in any good idea, communities coming together, in any good idea, also this sense of, again, an intrinsic, compelling drive, I would say almost a calling to see that happen. And I know that was true several years ago when we started this project, because again, it started with an idea. It started with me going over there with a doctor to Mali, West Africa. We were driving down this dirt road, and we saw this village, and the leader who we were with said, "Why don't we stop and visit this village?" And so we walked up to this village. I mean, there's just nothing out there. There's people literally laying around on the ground in the dirt. And we looked at that, and I asked the African leader, "Why are they here?" Well, there's a doctor that comes every once in a while, and so they're hoping that he'll come today and he'll examine them. And of course, I was with a doctor, and the doctor I was with just went into his doctor mode and started just examining these people and taking care of them, and the other African leaders kind of jumped in. And you just realize, I can't believe that we live on the same planet, that we're here, and you have people that are just laying in the dirt waiting and hoping that someone will take care of them. And so we spent about 2 hours there, and then we drove out of that village. And I remember several years ago that same feeling of driving out of that village and looking in the rearview mirror back at the village, seeing it there, and the people laying there in the dirt, still waiting for someone else to come, because there were still people that needed help. And we're bouncing across this dirt road in Africa and thinking, I can't leave this place. I've got to stay here. I've got to be a part of this. We've got to do something. We can do something for these people. And there was this sense of almost an overwhelming sense of just this calling to come back and to be a part of this and to help these people. So that was several years ago. Since that time, since that moment of driving across that dirt road in Africa, we've been able to help put in a hospital. We put in 2 clinics, a maternity ward, and a water well. And so last February, that's why we were there. We were dedicating that water well. And all these people came out. And that's why that African leader was there, saying, never underestimate the power of an idea. And so out of that has come, actually since February, fast forward, we're October, 4 other water wells have been put in. Many more engineering students from the university have got involved to put in solar panels into these medical clinics. And the impact of that idea to help that region, help those people, has now resulted in about 40,000 people today who have clean water. And now there's a maternity ward that will serve about 12,000, and the goal to put in 4 more of those. And so I asked, where do good ideas come from? Well, they come from, thoughts, things that we're exposed to. Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers talks about levels of success in our life. And he talks about 2 things. One, the rule of 10,000 hours, that, sometimes people who are experts have put a lot of time and they become, he says 10,000 hours and become an expert at whatever they're doing. But he also says there's environment. And no one reaches a level of success without other people helping, without communities coming together. And so I think about what Gladwell talks about in his research about these levels of success, whether it's the Beatles, whether it's the co-founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates, or whether it's other leaders who have reached levels of success. Again, it's this sense of environment and community that come together. And out of that comes ideas, and they start to grow and gain some momentum and organically start to take off. But then there's also, again, this relentless push and commitment. And so I think back that evening when we were sitting there talking to that leader, and he looked at those teachers, and I thought, That's such a powerful statement. It is such a powerful statement. Never underestimate the power of an idea. And then to think, what if? What if we didn't do it? What if we said it was too risky or too hard or too much work or cost too much? You know what? And you think, well, 40,000 people wouldn't have clean water. And so I'm glad that we grabbed that idea. And I'm glad that there was a community that came together and grabbed a hold of that idea. And I'm glad that we were relentless in pursuing that idea.